the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. Now, let's have a look at some potential people that could be future Impact Wrestling Hall of Famers. Now, currently, there are 9 people currently in the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. Now, the company at this point has been around for 18 years. Obviously, Impact was founded in 2002 by Jeff and Jerry Jarrett, and they have had, during this 18-year period, some of the all-time greats in professional wrestling compete in Impact Wrestling / TNA ring and cut their teeth in the company. Some absolute legends, some up-and-comers that became legends. They have had the best of the best. They really have had some absolutely fantastic performers compete in an Impact Wrestling ring. Now, currently, the current members of the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame include the likes of Sting, Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, Earl Hebner, Gail Kim, Abyss, and Ken Shamrock. But after Ken Shamrock's recent induction into the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame, I thought about what other wrestlers from Impact Wrestling's history should also be considered as a lock. I'm not talking about ifs or maybes, but a lock for the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame sometime in the future. Now, currently, on the usual pattern of things when it comes to Impact Wrestling, currently Impact inducts a new member into their Hall of Fame every 1 or 2 years. So potentially it could take a while here before we see any of these names inducted into the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. But what I do want to say before we get started and discuss some of these potential future Impact Wrestling Hall of Famers is that obviously there are some names that haven't been included here. And I'll probably do another video at some point titled something like, I don't know, 5 more future inductees into the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame, etc. But to give you a bit of a background here, for the selection process for this video, I wanted to cover all the bases. So I wanted to include, obviously, people that were TNA originals, former world champions, tag team wrestlers, knockouts, and X Division pioneers too. I wanted to cover all the bases and all the facets of Impact Wrestling / TNA Wrestling's history. So some people could also be eligible for future inductions as tag teams as well as singles wrestlers. So it's worth considering that too, or part of a faction as well. So let's get started with the first future inductee into the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. So first up, we have none other than the phenomenal AJ Styles. Now, for many, many years, he really was the face of Impact Wrestling. I know in WWE, he calls himself the face that runs the place, but for years, that really was the case in Impact Wrestling. Now, AJ Styles, a little known fact about AJ Styles, it's mentioned by AJ and co-founder of TNA Wrestling, Jeff Jarrett, is that AJ Styles was actually the first talent ever signed by Impact Wrestling by then founder Jeff Jarrett. And to me, AJ Styles, he was the pinnacle. He was the pinnacle of Impact and TNA for so many years. And he was actually with the company for 12 years. And yes, it did end ugly with AJ Styles and TNA Wrestling. In my opinion, the biggest mistake that the company ever made was letting go AJ Styles. Now, obviously, that's probably a big statement. I know there are a lot of mistakes that Impact Wrestling have made throughout their history. Whether it involves Vince Russo, Dixie Carter, Jeff Jarrett, there are too many to name when it comes to Impact Wrestling. Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff. But for me, the biggest mistake that the company ever made was letting go their biggest homegrown star. And he didn't want to go. AJ Styles did not want to leave TNA Wrestling. But at the time, this was in 2014, his contract was coming up, and Impact said, yep, we want to sign you back, AJ Styles. But then they said they wanted to give him a pay cut. Yes, AJ Styles, arguably the biggest homegrown star in Impact Wrestling history, they wanted to give AJ Styles a pay cut. AJ Styles, the AJ Styles, your biggest TNA original star that you had, they wanted to give a pay cut to the phenomenal one. AJ Styles is the biggest homegrown star to come out of TNA, and they wanted to give him a pay cut? Seriously? I mean, I know I've mentioned that a million times, but it still blows my mind even 6 years later after the fact. It's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. Now, you just have to look at some of the achievements that AJ Styles has achieved during his time with Impact Wrestling and TNA Wrestling. He was the first ever X Division champion back in 2002, a division at the time that no one really knew what it was. It wasn't about weight limits, it was about no limits. And AJ Styles was the first person to really personify that. And he was the guy to put the bout on and show, look, this is the X Division, this is what it is. And AJ Styles showed us exactly what the X Division was during his time in Impact Wrestling. So that he was the first ever X Division champion, but he was also a 6-time X Division champion. Now, during his time with Impact Wrestling as well, AJ Styles was a 5-time world champion during his time with TNA. That includes a 2-time TNA World Heavyweight Championship run and also a 3-time NWA World Heavyweight Championship run too. Now, also during his time with Impact Wrestling, AJ Styles is a 6-time Tag Team Champion. He was a 4-time NWA World Tag Team Champion and a 2-time TNA World Tag Team Champion. In addition to that, he held the TNA Legends / Television Championship, whatever you want to call it. That bout went through a million different names, but he was a 2-time TNA Legends / Television Champion. AJ Styles was also the first ever TNA Triple Crown Champion and the first ever TNA Grand Slam Champion too. He also won the Bound for Glory series, I believe that was in 2013, 2014. And to this day, for me, he's the person you probably arguably associate the most with TNA wrestling. Now, I know some people would say, well, I don't know about that, Jeff Jarrett, Dixie Carter. But for me, when I think of, if you said to me, name the biggest and best wrestler from TNA wrestling's history, for me, I would always say AJ Styles. And I know the likes of Sting, Kurt Angle, and others have competed there, but it was AJ Styles. I think he was the guy that I associate the most with TNA wrestling. It was his place. And even now, after all of his success in WWE and New Japan and around the world, even to this day, I still think of him as a TNA guy. And look, at this point in his life and his career, AJ Styles, he re-signed with the WWE last year. And he signed, I think it was a new 5-year contract. And I think even he said that's his last contract in professional wrestling. And I think AJ Styles is going to retire in WWE, I really do. And I don't think he'll ever come back to Impact to have one last match or a retirement match or anything like that. But I do hope that one day post-retirement, he can be inducted into the Impact Hall of Fame. Because realistically, there aren't many people that did more to build that company than AJ Styles did. And AJ Styles put a heck of a lot of blood, sweat and tears into building TNA wrestling in the time that he was there. And he absolutely deserves to be recognized for that fact. And if they're ever going to give anyone their own wing when it comes to Impact Wrestling or TNA Wrestling, it's AJ Styles. So there is no doubt in my mind that AJ Styles is a future Impact Wrestling Hall of Famer. The next future inductee is none other than Bobby Roode. Yes, the glorious one himself. Before he was glorious in WWE, he was pretty damn glorious in Impact Wrestling too. Now, Bobby Roode was world champion twice during his time with Impact Wrestling, but to this day, Bobby Roode holds the honor of being the longest reigning TNA World Heavyweight Champion in the company's history during his first run with the championship. This is an accolade that still stands to this day. His 256-day long reign is still top of the pile when it comes to TNA / Impact Wrestling history. Now also, he competed in TNA Wrestling from 2004 to 2016. That is 12 years. He is another guy just like AJ Styles that gave so much time and effort to Impact Wrestling. And Bobby Roode even stayed during the times in 2014, 2015 and part of 2016 when things really weren't that good in Impact. Those years there, as we got even into 2017, when things really started to explode with possibly Impact going very close to going out of business, Bobby Roode stayed for the longest time that he could. And he was also the world champion during quite a challenging time for Impact Wrestling. And it's funny because that time in Impact Wrestling, the 2011, 2012, 2013, now is almost looked back on quite fondly, and it was heavily criticised at the time, but you look back on it fondly, and I think people look back at it and say, you know what, it wasn't that bad, actually, it wasn't that bad. And Bobby Roode was the world champion during that challenging time. Yes, Impact was still on Spike TV, but at that time they tried to go on the road. You had the brain trust of Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, Dixie Carr and Bruce Pritchard going on there. It was Game of Thrones and it was chaotic. The company was bleeding money at the time. And yes, Bobby Roode was the champion then, but he did a good job. He did a very good job during that time and he stepped up his game. He became a main event level wrestler and he did a great job. He really did. And since then, he's had some success in WWE, which you always love to see as well. You always love to see a wrestler that you followed for years and years in a smaller company like TNA succeed in a big company like WWE. But when it comes to Bobby Roode, a bit like AJ Styles, I will always consider Bobby Roode to be an Impact / TNA guy. He had his greatest successes and spent the majority of his career in Impact Wrestling. He's an 8-time tag team champion in TNA. Was an NWA World Tag Team Champion twice and a 6-time TNA World Tag Team Champion. 5 of those reigns were with James Storm as Beer Money. And honestly, for me, Beer Money, it's arguably, if not the greatest tag team in TNA history. And I know you have other tag teams that have competed in Impact throughout its 18-year history. I know you have the likes of Team 3D, who are already Hall of Famers in Impact. I know you have the likes of the North now, who could be in the question for the best tag team going right now in the world. But Beer Money, James Storm and Robert Roode, they were an original TNA creation. They were a great tag team. They're still talked about to this day, which is a sign of a great tag team, and Beer Money were just that. They were a great tag team. They had great chemistry. 2 completely different gimmicks, by the way. At the time, Robert Roode was like a Wall Street banker and James Storm is a cowboy drinker. They put them together, Beer Money, and it just worked. It just worked. And honestly, you can make an argument for inducting Beer Money into the Impact Hall of Fame as a tag team alone. So that just shows the greatness of Bobby Roode during his time in Impact Wrestling. And in addition to his tag team championship reign, he's also, as I mentioned, a 2-time TNA World Heavyweight Champion. He's a first ballot Impact Hall of Famer. He's a TNA King of the Mountain champion before, and for all of the time that he committed to the company, for his achievements during his time there too, for me, Bobby Roode is an absolute slam dunk for a future place in the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. The next future inductee is none other than the Samoan submission machine. That's right, Samoa Joe. Now you have to look at Samoa Joe's achievements during his time in Impact Wrestling, and they read just as impressive as some of the other names that we've mentioned already so far. He's a former TNA Television Champion, a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion, twice a former TNA World Tag Team Champion. Once by himself, he had no tag team partner. He was both of the TNA World Tag Team Champions. The other time was with Magnus. He's a former 5-time TNA X Division Champion, a true pioneer of the X Division in Impact Wrestling, showing that, again, it wasn't about weight limits, it was about no limits. You had a bigger guy like Samoa Joe, up there in the 200s when it comes to his pounds, and he could fly around like anyone and have some of the greatest matches in TNA and Impact Wrestling history. He won the King of the Mountain in 2008. He was the 3rd TNA Grand Slam champion in the company's history, the 3rd TNA Triple Crown champion in the company's history. And also, people forget when it comes to Samoa Joe, this was a guy that when he first debuted in Impact, in TNA Wrestling, he was undefeated for 18 months. Nobody pinned or nobody made submit Samoa Joe for 18 months, a year and a half. Now, he's part of one of the best moments in TNA history, which was the debut of Kurt Angle in 2006. That confrontation between Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe facing off, and then Kurt Angle headbutts Samoa Joe, and then eventually Joe rises up and he's got blood trickling down his face. It's one of the best moments in TNA history. And he also had matches against Kurt Angle, like in the match at Genesis in January of 2007, where Samoa Joe lost for the first time in 18 months in Impact Wrestling. They also had the main event match for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, where Samoa Joe won his first and only TNA World title against Kurt Angle at Lockdown. I believe that was in 2008, which was, and still is to this day, the company's biggest pay-per-view in its history in terms of its buy rate. Samoa Joe was in the main event for that. Samoa Joe also had matches against the likes of AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels in the X Division, including the fabled Unbreakable 3-way match, which is the only match in TNA history to get a 5-star rating from Dave Meltzer. Like that means anything, but there is no doubt that it's one of, if not the greatest match in TNA history. And if you go back and watch it, it's just perfection. It's perfection. Now, I mentioned about AJ Styles and I mentioned about Bobby Roode. Would I say that Samoa Joe is an Impact guy? That, for me, is a very, very tough question. Because prior to coming in to Impact Wrestling, Samoa Joe was super big in Ring of Honor for a while. His feud against CM Punk is legendary in that company. But you do have to say he's probably best known for his time in TNA. So yeah, I would have to say that Samoa Joe was an Impact guy. He was with the company for 10 years. He did it all in the company, won everything there was to win. And he was a major player. He was a top main event level talent in Impact Wrestling. Now, at times, there's no doubt that Samoa Joe had some questionable booking in Impact Wrestling. Who doesn't? Look at the people that were booking the promotion at various occasions. The Nation of Violence, the weird ring attire, the tattoo on the face, the blade. Do I need to say more? But that Samoa Joe in his first 2 years in TNA was absolutely something else. And there's no doubt he's a first ballot Impact Wrestling Hall of Famer. He won everything there is to win, and he did it all in Impact. Now, could I see Samoa Joe having one more match in Impact once his WWE run is over? That to me is very, very tough to say. It's very tough to say. I think his in-ring days aren't over, and I know he's on commentary right now, and I know he hasn't wrestled in a while for WWE, but I think he will wrestle once again for WWE. He said so himself that his in-ring days are far from over. And quite frankly, right now in WWE, Samoa Joe, he has a good gig there. He does. He's excellent on commentary. The WWE higher-ups, most importantly Vince McMahon himself, very much enjoy his commentary work. So once Samoa Joe does indeed decide to retire, I think he'll probably just stick at that, and that's commentary in WWE. And look at the people that have done it before with WWE. If you're any good and you're comfortable doing it, that's a role you can keep for a very, very long time. So personally, I think Samoa Joe will retire in WWE and then stay as a commentator in WWE. So I think a final match in Impact Wrestling may unfortunately be off the cards, but he more than deserves to be in the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. The next future inductee is none other than the X Division pioneer himself, Chris Sabin. Now, Chris Sabin, a bit like the names we've already mentioned in this video, has absolutely done it all when it comes to Impact Wrestling. He's a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion. He's a former TNA World Tag Team Champion twice. Recently, of course, an Impact World Tag Team Champion with Alex Shelley as part of the Motor City Machine Guns. He's a former 8-time TNA X Division Champion. That is more X Division Championship reigns than anyone else in the company's history. Chris Sabin's also won the Super X Cup in 2003, the World X Cup in 2004 and 2006, and is the 6th TNA Triple Crown Champion in the company's history. Now, as I mentioned, Chris Sabin has more X Division championships than anyone in the promotion's history. Chris Sabin is no doubt an X Division pioneer, a tag team pioneer too, with Alex Shelley as part of the Motor City Machine Guns. And Chris Sabin's matches against the likes of Generation Me and Beer Money are unbelievable, and they did so much to pioneer tag team wrestling in TNA because they were a small tag team. They were essentially what would be a cruiserweight tag team. They even won the IWGP Junior Tag Team Championships because they weren't, a heavyweight tag team. And they developed and became one of the best tag teams in TNA history. I mentioned maybe Beer Money are the best, but the Motor City Machine Guns are up there, there's no doubt. And the Motor City Machine Guns have had unbelievable matches against the likes of Generation Me, now known as the Young Bucks, and Beer Money themselves in Team 3D. In fact, in Impact Wrestling, they were the team to retire Team 3D back in 2010. And you also have to think about Chris Sabin and the X Division work that he's done. I mentioned he was an X Division pioneer. He's had Ultimate X matches, and now, in his second run with the company, he's now working with young teams like the North and Ace Austin and Madman Fulton and trying to get them over and bring back Impact Wrestling to what it used to be. He also works as a producer backstage now, and he's worked with the company for 12 years across 2 separate spells with Impact Wrestling. And for me, as I mentioned, the Motor City Machine Guns, they're one of the best tag teams of all time. They really are. And not many people have given as much to Impact Wrestling and continue to give so much to Impact Wrestling as Chris Sabin throughout his career. He's torn his ACL in both knees twice, and he's still wrestling and he's still giving it all to Impact Wrestling. So there's no doubt in my mind that Chris Sabin is a future Impact Hall of Famer. And finally, the last inductees in this video, future Impact Wrestling Hall of Famers, are none other than the beautiful people Angela Love, Velvet Sky, and Madison Rayne. Now, I mentioned I wanted to cover all bases in this videos for these future Impact Hall of Famers, and I really, really wanted to have the Knockouts as one of the inductees. Now, currently, there is only one knockout in the company's history that has been inducted into the Impact Hall of Fame, and that is, of course, Gail Kim, who holds the record for the most Knockouts championships in the company's history. Now, the Knockouts, they're a huge part of Impact's history, and to be honest, all three of these wrestlers individually I could put in as a singles, but I really wanted to have a faction too. And for me, the beautiful people, they were the original heel female stable in Impact. And regardless of what people say, they were a draw. They were a massive draw, and they were absolutely over massively. A segment with the beautiful people did higher numbers than nearly anything else on the show at that time on TNA Impact. The Knockouts were always getting the highest rated segments during that period of time when it started off in 2008. And the beautiful people were really involved in that. They really were. So they did great. They were original, they were unique, and they could all work too to a various degrees, and they all got better. They were fantastic heels, the gimmick worked, and obviously originally it was just Angelina Love and Velvet Sky, which worked great as the tag team, as the original beautiful people. But I also really liked the trio of having Madison Rayne in there too, and I know some people like the original best, but for me I found Madison Rayne really complemented them well. And to me, when I think of the beautiful people, yes, you think of Angelina Love and Velvet Sky, but you have to factor in Madison Rayne because she spent so much time being involved in that faction, became so integral to it that it just, I don't think you can have the beautiful people without Madison Rayne. I don't. So Angelina Love, let's go through all of these, their individual accomplishments. Angelina Love, she was with and has been with Impact Wrestling on a variety of occasions from 2007 to 2009, 2010 to 2012, 2014 to 2016, and in 2017 too. She is a 6-time TNA Women's Knockout Champion. That is the second most reigns in the company's history behind the Impact Hall of Famer herself, Gail Kim. She's also a former TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champion with Winter. Yes, do you remember Winter? The former Katie Lee Burchill. What a crazy storyline that was. 7 years overall in the company. Arguably, I would probably say the best worker out of the bunch. Just a fantastic worker even to this day, can still go. She's with Ring of Honor right now, and just again, first ballot Impact Hall of Famer. Now also I mentioned Velvet Sky. She was with Impact Wrestling on 2 separate occasions from 2007 to 2012, and then from later on in 2012 to 2016 she was with the company for 9 years, a former TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champion with the beautiful people, with Madison Rayne and Lacey Von Erich, yes, remember that name, and also a former TNA Women's Knockout Champion twice. Again, maybe not the best worker out of all three of them, but was great on the mic and just encapsulated the gimmick and the role to perfection. I was a big fan of Velvet Sky, and I think she's actually quite underrated. And also, as I mentioned, you had Madison Rayne, who's been with Impact Wrestling on 3 separate occasions, from 2009 to 2013, and from later on in 2013 to 2017, and obviously she returned in 2019 and is currently a member of the Impact Wrestling roster production team now. She has been with the company for 9 years on 3 separate occasions. As I mentioned, she's currently a commentator with her husband Josh Matthews for Impact Wrestling on Access TV. Now, I know I've been a little bit critical previously of her commentary, but what you can't be critical of is her ability in the ring and her work in the ring. She is a former 5-time TNA Knockouts champion and a former 2-time TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champion, as I mentioned, with Lacey Von Erich and Velvet Sky as part of the beautiful people, and also with Gail Kim. So all 3 women individually could be inducted into the Impact Hall of Fame, but the beautiful people as a gimmick, as a group, as a faction, for me, there is no doubt they deserve to be in the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. So there you go, there's 5 people that are future Impact Wrestling Hall of Famers, but of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on my selections? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys and chatting about Impact Wrestling here on the channel. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak with you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.